What is up, everybody? It is your host, Lou Martinez, on this, my new podcast, the 2AMBurrito Show. You might remember me from such podcast as Indie Apocalypse, which was a podcast mostly focused on indie filmmaking with San Diego as a case study. We were able to do almost 100 episodes with my boy Ty Mabry on that, and we stopped doing it a few years back. I've always had the itch to do something new ever since then, and this is going to be my new vehicle for it. It is, as opposed to my other videos that I'm putting out, mostly geared for an audio audience. So I'm not going to necessarily be playing to the camera as much, but we will have a video portion of it, so you can sort of at least, watch if you want to see what I look like close to a microphone, talking like this. So, welcome. And I'm starting this off, obviously, because there were just not enough podcasts on the market. I was like, I want to listen to a podcast, but there's not enough of them out there. No, obviously. But do I get a pass because I used to have one? And I'm not just one of those people that just started a brand new one during the pandemic. The pandemic podcast boom. I do like to see that a lot of my friends and colleagues are being more active with media, putting out content, putting out classes, things of that nature. And, this is, and the other videos that we're doing in the Edwood Film School series are things that we're trying to do to stay creative. And obviously, this is a weird time for everybody. Hopefully, we have a captive audience, people that want to consume more media, listen to more things, learn more things. This isn't, where you're going to come to for health information. So no health information and no politics. How about that? Those will be my two rules, and we'll see how long it takes us to break it. But, since this will be a weekly thing, I want to start off by just kind of giving you my thoughts on everything that's happened. The people that are watching can see that I'm rocking my New York gear and that I have the Dunk poster. And when I say the Dunk, anybody who's a Knicks fan from the 1990s knows what I'm talking about. John Starks dunking over the entire Bulls front court in Madison Square Garden. Every kid growing up in New York, or 70% of the kids growing up in New York that were Knicks fans during the 90s, had that poster on the wall. I'm also rocking the throwback Ewing jersey from the 90s as well, from the Knicks Bulls series. And just finished watching the ESPN docu-series The Last Dance, which was not necessarily a puff piece for Michael Jordan. It was a great documentary. I think it lost steam in the last couple of episodes as it got a little sort of, I don't want to say boring when you're talking about the greatest player of all time, but it did get a little boring. No, that's the word I was looking for. I mean, obviously, you already know where it's going. The platform or the what do I want to say? I want to say the mechanism, I guess, that they use or the style of they use at the documentary, where they jump back and forth from the first three-peat to the second three-peat, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, sort of worked at the beginning. At the end, as you sort of kind of could see what was happening, they just kind of either stayed too long in one part of the film and then went back to the 90s. It got a little confusing at the end. Also, the fact that Jordan had, I don't know if he had final cut, but it was a lot of it was his footage, so he had to authorize it. Kind of takes it a couple of points off. I don't think it's the best documentary of all time, the best sports documentary, absolutely not, of all time. I don't think it's in the discussion. I think it's very good, but I think there's several of the ESPN 30 for 30s that came out several years ago, the Bill Simmons produced ones, that are much better than this. The two Escobars, obviously, it's not even the best basketball documentary. Obviously, Hoop Dreams is the best basketball documentary of all time. So what would I rate it? Probably 7. Is that some Knick fan hatred? A little bit. Scottie Pippen's probably my least favorite player of all time, not only because he posterized Ewing in that series that the Knicks eventually won. One of the nastiest dunks of all time, obviously, where he stepped all over him, dragged his nuts across his chest. It was just disgusting. But also, no, it's probably the Knick hatred. That's why I probably think it's a 7. Being a Knicks fan in the 90s and knowing that Michael Jordan existed, it was a rough deal because you had this hope, you had this tough, gritty team, you had the go New York, go New York. You had the '90s Knicks, John Starks, Oakley, Mason, R.I.P., Ewing, and you just you hoped, and there was a lot of myopic Knick fans during that time. They're like, we're gonna beat the Bulls this year, and we're gonna beat the Bulls this year, and you always thought yeah, it's gonna happen. But in the back of your mind, when you were tuning into the game, and it was in Chicago, and they started playing that friggin' best sports introduction music of all time. Like, I got to give it up to Chicago for that. But the Knicks going into Chicago and the lights going off in Chicago and that bull on the big screen and that little music from North Carolina. And you were just like, it's not going to happen. But, it didn't happen for Barkley. It didn't happen for Karl Malone. It didn't happen for Gary Payton. It didn't happen for a lot of teams during that time. So I seen some Knicks fans' reaction to the documentary like, damn, I can't believe we were up 2-0 in that series and then we lost it. But I take solace, and I sort of am proud, of the fact that proud of it's not my team. I didn't play. I didn't put on the jersey. I put on the jersey today. But proud of the way that they were a team to be reckoned with, that they didn't back down from anybody, and that they gave him up. I guess the best you can do is say, well, we made it tough for Jordan. But at the end of the day, he was the GOAT. He continues to be the GOAT. LeBron outshines him off the court as an icon, and obviously I think it's because of the era that we live in. And even though I think Kobe was more athletically gifted than Mike, he was too much of a Michael clone to surpass him, because he even says he learned from him. And I don't think that, it would have been an amazing universe where their careers collided. But I think Kobe needed to see what was possible in MJ to become Kobe, and he came out at the right time. So the best parts of that series were the first few episodes where you got to see Kobe, you got to see, maybe up until like 5, 6. The Dennis Rodman stuff was whatever. We already knew that. So I think it had some good moments, but overall, the ending was a bit anticlimactic because we already, I think, knew how it ended. So I think that takes away from the documentary. They did go into some kind of dark places for Michael, the gambling allegations, stuff like that. Obviously, it's weird that his family was like very rarely seen. But again, I think that comes to him being more something by Jordan, about Jordan, as opposed to from an independent observer. The things that you can be critical of Mike, obviously he didn't take political stances. He said Republicans buy Nikes too. He kind of was mum when people were getting shot on the street of Chicago and getting their $300 Jordans stolen. So, you can give him crap about that. He has gotten it. The difference between him and LeBron in what they do socially is night and day. Mike was mostly about Mike, his image, and winning, and LeBron is about more about community, family, etc. So, those I think are still, lucky enough to have really seen 3 of the top 5 players of all time, I think, in Kobe, MJ, and LeBron in my lifetime. So, I'm lucky to see that. The documentary, I don't think they have anything on. Obviously, they don't talk about his time with the Wizards, his comeback, how horrible of an owner he is. So, but also it's supposed to be specifically about the 98 Last Dance. However, they do talk about all his other glory days. So it's basically about MJ in his apex before he got divorced, all this other stuff. So I think for what it is, a documentary with a Jordan-esque slant, it is still very good, worth a watch. And spoiler alert, he wins 6 fucking championships, and he's the best basketball player of all time. So if you basically already know the plot going into it, and he was really good, and he would get pissed off at little stuff, and make it happen. And he would gamble all night and drop 40 on you the next day. And he would come back after a year and a half of playing baseball and drop 55 on the Knicks, and then go for the last shot where everybody thinks he's going to hit 57, and then he passes it to some 7-footer for a layup, and they beat us like his 3rd game back after a year and a half off, and we still couldn't beat him. So that's Michael Jordan in a nutshell. So what else happened this week? In rapping and snitching news, Tekashi 6ix9ine was released from prison, and on home release, his own fans were snitching on where he was staying because he was posting on a balcony doing Instagram videos, and one of his neighbors snitched on him, ironically, and he had to move. Now, I've never been a big fan of Kid's music. He proclaims himself King of New York. I don't know. I think there's still a lot of rappers that are still breathing that would argue against that. And obviously, growing up, as most minority kids, urban kids, you're brought up with rules about snitching. Even in your own family, you didn't want tattletales, right? But he gets on Instagram and he breaks Instagram live record, gets 2 million people watching him. He drops a video after coming out of jail, being a police informant, putting people behind bars, just telling on everybody, telling on people that just dry snitching on everybody. People weren't even involved with it. He was trying to get other people just randomly snitching on them. And he gets like 200 million views in like 3 days on a brand new video. So obviously, not everybody is stone cold on the stop snitching rules. If you have 200 million views, there's got to be a segment of the population out there that just doesn't care. They like the kid's music, which, he sounds like Mexican Onyx to me, but his music is very, I want to say predetermined, like it follows a pattern. His naming his songs is kind of following a pattern. He's just basically trolling the entire music industry, daring somebody to kill him. It's a weird scene, and he's basically steering into the curb saying, okay, I snitched. The reason I did was because the people that I was supposed to be protecting were stealing from me, kidnapping him, having sex with his baby moms. I don't care. I don't know. A couple of other things he said that they were doing. So to his point, he's basically saying, why should I protect these people, and why should I do 47 years or whatever he was facing for somebody that wasn't going to, do anything for me? And to that point, he was never about that life. He was hanging with a crew to try to get a rep for himself, to try to make himself legitimate. He was literally saying, this is what I do. I really, really do this. And then it turns out he really wasn't doing it. He was just, a kid with an image. He created an image for himself that works to a certain segment of the population, mostly suburban kids that really have never had any or not that much of a struggle. I think that's why, like, whatever dude is that does the Gucci gang thing, like, to people who have never really seen a gangster, who really have never had family members that were gangsters or thugs or whatever you want to call them, like street people, somebody that looks that part and talks that part confuses them, and they might think, oh, this is what a real gangster looks like. This guy's got the face tattoos, he's got the look. Meanwhile, those people wouldn't last a second in an actual hood. But to the uninformed masses, I guess, or people in the suburbs, kids with a little bit of money, a guy that looks like Tekashi might fit the role in their head of what an actual hard or thug or a fucking gangster would be. And in their mind, I think they're willing to overlook what the old heads or what the people from the inner cities are saying, which is, this is a 100% rule, he shouldn't have snitched. And I think they're ignoring that to the point where, this kid is in this very narrow lane that's very, very dangerous because there's real people out there and everybody's wearing a mask. So kid might get run up on. His fans already were basically dropping info on where he was by posting videos when they see him. He's not somebody that can blend in. So his only option was basically to steer into this curve and say, listen, I'm just going to own it. I'm going to troll it. I'm going to make myself into a rat. He made himself into a literal rat in his video. Like the kid's like 4'8", but he's got gigantic balls. He might be a snitch. He might be a rat. He's steering into that curve. He's banking on the fact that there is a avenue for him to go down where he lives this ultra protected life. And if he makes money off these people, ultra protected life, sorry. And if he's making money off this part of the population that doesn't give a fuck about anything and are just going to be his fans, ride or die, no matter what he did, and he can get 200, 300 million views on YouTube in a week, that translates into a lot of fucking cheese. And that buys security, and that buys him time. And, maybe people forget after a while, or they give him a pass, and maybe that's how his path forward is. But he's put himself in this little sort of very narrow corridor that's got a fucking huge degree of difficulty. Because he fucks this up and somebody gets to him, he's done. He keeps his little lane, stays hidden, drops his little videos, collects those checks, and disappears. Then, the fuck you gonna do? He still can't hide. He looks like a literal troll. So, I don't know, that's my thoughts. I mean, as somebody that grew up in 90s hip hop and stuff like that, I don't think he's the king of New York. I'm not up on everything modern music wise, obviously, but I just think that's a little disrespectful. But, to each their own. And that's basically what's happened this week. We also lost a couple more celebrities. Fred Willard died this week. Who's the other guy that died? The singer. You know what I'm talking about? A wapabaloo. Oh, Little Richard. Yeah. So we lost Fred Willard and Little Richard this week. Fred Willard from Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show. He was the king of the mockumentary. An incredibly talented guy, was doing, just little cameos. He would just show up on Jimmy Kimmel's show. He would show up in a lot of places, Modern Family, etc. And then obviously Little Richard, who was an icon, a giant. I think under normal circumstances, him passing away would have been a lot bigger news. But he's somebody who inspired countless artists. And he was sort of a transition between older rock and a segment of time when rock and roll was coming together with a lot of other influences, and he was in the middle of all of it. So, RIP to those guys. Obviously, it was a rough week for that, and it's a rough week with everybody. I mean, everybody is either scared to go out or itching to go out. There's very little in between. There's the people that believe that we're being oppressed by being told to stay in the house. And then there's the people that think that we are not staying in enough and that we just need to just say, fuck, scratch this summer. Let's just all stay in the entire time. Everybody gets an air conditioner and let's ride it out. I'm somewhere in between. I understand that it's, impossible to kind of have it both ways, but I think that a lot of the people that are feeling oppressed because they can't go get a haircut have never really been fully oppressed. I do think there's some truth to that, that when you've never really been oppressed and you've never really had that major issues in your life, them telling you that you can't go to Walmart or you need to wear a mask when you go into Costco might feel like you're being oppressed, when in reality it's just life. And then I also question how people that have been stockpiling beans and ammunition because they knew the apocalypse was coming after 6 weeks start freaking out. Because I thought that's what they were built for. And I do also believe that if it was brown militias out there protesting as opposed to lily white ones, that the response would be different. And I don't think that you can. I don't think that you can really argue that point. There's a lot of waving your privilege around at these rallies where people are going nuts. And I understand their frustration if people are willing to die for the economy. It's that old Death Clock song, go forth and conquer, go forth and die. You know, it's a weird time, right? So we don't have the time to properly mourn some of these people that are passing away. It seems like this is something that's affecting everybody differently. And if you are the people that want to go out, I mean, I think at least you can do is be safe. Protect yourself, protect others. Everybody has free will, but I don't think we're being oppressed. I just think we're being told to stay the fuck home to try to allow more space at the hospitals for when you do get sick. And I think at the end of the day, this is going to probably touch everybody at some level. And I don't know what the future looks like after that, but I think there's maybe a chance that we get back to like 50% of what the world was. I don't think people are going to be super happy to just be crowded into places, but I could probably be wrong because even during the pandemic, people were still breaking the laws to have parties. I think that certain communities, when they say the club is open, it's going to be fucking packed. So I think, I don't know, we live in a very mixed country, with people from all over the world with different cultures and different set of beliefs. So I think that's why the U.S. is such an interesting case for this, because other countries have more unified cultures, ways of being. And I think they have been able to have a more of a consensus build around what the right way to approach everything is, as in how to stay safe, how to do things the right way. But I mean, is it true that we're the only country that's really protesting? I don't know. So here where I'm speaking, middle of May 2020, we're trying to decide what stays open and what stays closed. So these next 6 weeks are going to be uberly important to the future of this country. That's my self-important thought for the week. What's your self-important thought for the week? Let me know. But I want to do something called My Week in Media or My Week in Movies, where I talk, everybody, and you guys might remember this if you were listeners of the previous podcast. I consume a massive amount of media. What the reason I do that is I work a traditional sales job, and when I talk to people, after I'm entering information, I'll usually have something queued up, and that's my reward for getting a sale. Is I'll be able to watch 5-10 minutes of whatever it is that I'm watching that day to get while I'm sort of entering and multitasking. So there's three kind of things that I watch: things that I've been saving, shows, movies, usually that are within the last 5 years that I consciously know that I haven't seen, and then I eventually have to get around to seeing a movie that came out that I wanted to see, missed, or a TV show that I never watched that I wanted to eventually binge. There's stuff that I'm saving even now. Shows, seasons of shows, and then the second category is stuff that you watch and binge right away. Ozark, BoJack, anything, any of my favorite shows, the second that they're on Netflix or Hulu or an Amazon, I am binging that entire new season starting at midnight, usually, if not by the latest, that next day. So that's the second category. And then there's the rewatch, the stuff that you watch because it's comfortable, because you love it, because it's one of your favorite shows of all time. I mean, one of the rewatches that I usually do is every couple of years I'll rewatch The Sopranos. I have a whole video coming out about my last rewatch. But, I usually watch it and skip most of the Dr. Melfi therapy parts. Recently, my current rewatch that I finished this last week was The Office. This is probably the third time I've rewatched The Office. I watched it originally when it was on, then I rewatched it probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know if it was just getting tired of seeing it on my front page of Netflix or something, but, I decided, what the fuck? I'm going to just go through this one more time. And when I rewatch shows, I have them on a separate computer, sometimes while I'm working, sometimes while I'm editing, sometimes in the background while I'm fixing my room. But how some people listen to music, I watch movies and TV shows. I always have one in the background somewhere when I'm walking around. Even if I'm doing dishes, I'm watching something on my phone. So I'm rewatching The Office, and I find myself increasingly frustrated with the Andy Bernard Nardog character. He serves a purpose when he first appears, but then his character is literally all over the place in terms of motivation, in terms of character traits. No other character in The Office changes their core principles as much as Andy Bernard does from one season to the other. It makes no fucking sense what he does or why he does it, what his motivation is. He's okay at the beginning. His entire middle story arcs are horrendous, forgettable. You can skip through 99% of it. And then he sort of redeems himself at the very end of the series. And after Michael Scott, that series loses itself completely for a little bit. And you just have to sort of push through those final couple of seasons to get to a very satisfying finale. Although if the show had ended with Pam hugging Michael when he's at the airport, when he leaves the show, I would have been fine with that as well. But I don't know, what do you guys feel about some of your favorite shows after you rewatch them? Is The Office in your top 5 comedies of all time? Is it number 1 for you? I mean, some people are Office lifers. They love it. They don't say it. I've been recently, and this is something that I'm saving. For example, I'm a big fan of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but there's 2 seasons of the show that I haven't watched since it moved over from Fox to NBC. I haven't watched. I've only watched a half a season, so that's a show that I'm saving for when I'm in a rut. I know that I have a show that I'm absolutely gonna love. And even though I don't know anything that's happened in the last season and a half, I'm pretty sure it was fucking great. And I am joining the Brooklyn Nine-Nine is better than the Office Club. And I'll say it, Title of Your Sex Tape is greater than That's What She Said. Absolutely. Not only because That's What She Said has been played out, That's What She Said, but also because I said so. Title of Your Sex Tape is better than That's What She Said. Yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is an incredible show. So I rewatched The Office, skipped through all the Nardog stuff, except for when he's getting a tattoo and except for the finale, because I think he's just a fucking frustrating character. Some things I've said that people were like frustrated with Pam during the show. I mean, the Pam Jim storyline is fucking, I mean, it's a classic little love story. What are you going to do about it? I also think that John Krasinski, who played Jim, and his Good News Network is one of the things that I've found on YouTube recently that's fucking awesome. Don't chop onions while you're watching the show. Don't sit on your keys, because it'll fucking get to you, dude. You'll be there watching them, and they'll do some cool ass shit, and it'll just be like, oh, I should have chopped all these onions. So sad, or so uplifting, actually, because it's only good news. So, here's a couple of YouTube channels that I found, which is the Good News Network with John Krasinski. I also started watching History Buffs on YouTube, which is kind of like a review of classic historical movies with added notes about how they compare to the actual events. And that's something that I always do. If I watch a movie about World War II or Vietnam or something that it's a historical event, I will definitely, when I'm getting close to the end of that movie, go back and Google events of blah, 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 how they compare. So it's something that I think there's a vast wanting of knowledge for. And so I started watching some of their videos. I recommend them as well. The rest of my weekend movies and media is a movie that I hadn't watched before that I went back and rewatched, that I went back and caught up on because I started going on a Yorgos Lanthimos sort of binge. I watched The Lobster a few years ago, not knowing anything about it. Just saw the poster, clicked on it, watched it on a movie site. Thought it was fucking awesome. Put him on my radar, but I really wasn't aware of how he had gotten some critical acclaim for some of these earlier movies like Dogtooth, Alps, etc. And then I sort of kind of put him out of my mind. I then saw The Favorite, and I really enjoyed that film, even though I had no idea it was his. That was a really cool movie. And then recently this week, I watched The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which at first I thought maybe it was a prequel to The Lobster because the character that Colin Farrell plays in The Lobster is recently single. And in The Killing of a Sacred Deer, he's coupled up. So I thought for a second maybe it was a direct sequel, but it wasn't. It's its own thing. And obviously the first thing that strikes you about his films is the dialogue, as it feels like dialogue that was run through a Google translation page. It feels like the dialogue was written in a different language and translated to English. Because there's no idioms, there's no specific cultural references. It's all very direct. I don't want to say there's no subtext because obviously some of it has subtext, but it's just very strange. It takes you a minute to sort of get you in to that universe and understanding that people speak, I very much enjoy a ham and cheese sandwich. Yes, ham and cheese is my favorite as well. Have you ever tried turkey and cheese? No, I have not. Is that good? It's very deliberate. It's almost the opposite of what we used to say about the dialogue on a show like Dawson's Creek, where that was a show where we had these 15, 16-year-old kids that were talking like these grizzled 33-year-old New York playwrights. And as the dialogue didn't match the people, and they was just like, these kids can't be so smart. Or what you might say about an Aaron Sorkin script, where it's like these people can't just have all these thoughts just rolling off the tongue. It's a little too sing-songy. The dialogue that he uses, although simplistic, really adds to the sort of creepiness of the universes that he creates. And Killing of the Sacred Deer was a very good movie. It was interesting. It was a mixture of hyper reality, fantasy, mythology, old stories passed down from generations. It was almost a fairy tale, told in a very stern, direct way. And I really enjoyed his films so far. The three that I've really stepped into. I started to watch Dogtooth, but I got taken away from it. So this is what I do as a filmmaker, as a media consumer. things that pass me by, I sometimes go back and revisit or, make myself. So even though I might not have learned about him 5, 6 years ago when he started making waves, I'm aware of him now, and it's somebody that I'm very excited to see what they accomplish in the next few years. Another movie that I saw recently that's kind of one of these older films that somehow just passed me by. There's actually two that are major movies that passed me by that I saw recently. One of them is The Pianist, which was a Roman Polanski film from 2002. Obviously, Roman Polanski can't film in the U.S. anymore because of all the pending rape charges against him, and we last saw him for a moment in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as he was married to Sharon Tate at the time of her murder, but he was in Europe. And The Pianist in 2002, a film obviously about a Holocaust memoir by a Polish-Jewish pianist, is a movie that I started watching without knowing it was a Roman Polanski movie. I was just like, oh, I haven't seen The Pianist. It was sort of out of the back of my mind. It won awards. It was a very big movie during the early 2000s. And I guess the nearest comparison to it would be Schindler's List. And for a second, I was comparing, and comparing two movies about an incredibly evil, horrible period in history. It feels odd, but I almost thought they were comparable for a second in terms of the brutality that they showed and how powerful it was what they showed in helping us understand the realities of some of these people during that time. And how one single second decision, something luck, could affect a family and somebody's life. And about the spirit of survival. So for a moment, when I first started watching the movie, I was a little confused because I've never really gone back and watched all of Roman Polanski's earlier works. It didn't interest me. I understood that he was an important director. He was popular. But then he had his controversies, and I just felt like I didn't really need to see his work. So I think this might be, and I don't remember Rosemary's Baby. I might have watched it 20 years ago, and I don't remember it that well. So this was one of the first films by him that I saw, and I didn't know it was his movie, or I had forgotten it was his movie when I watched it, and I was impressed by it. Then I got a little confused by some of the choices that the director was making. And I finished watching, and I was sort of sitting there, and I was like, who directed this? And I was like, oh. And then at the credits roll, it says, film by Roman Polanski. And I was like, oh, okay. This is why this film stuck out in my mind before. So I think it's a worthwhile movie to watch if you haven't. I don't know if you need a rewatch because, some of these powerful movies that get these sort of horrible imagery in your head, you only need to watch them once, honestly. But I think it did feel interesting while I was watching it. So, that's kind of what I felt regarding that. The other big movie that I hadn't seen, and I guess I'm a little embarrassed that I had never watched this, was Magnolia. And that's because Paul Thomas Anderson is one of my favorite directors. I am a huge fan of The Master, There Will Be Blood, Boogie Nights. It's, there's a couple of shots in The Master that I just watch over and over. I'm actually going to do an entire video about the tracking shot that he does in the beginning of that movie when we first see Philip Seymour Hoffman's character on a boat. And if you like the Joker and you like Joaquin Phoenix, definitely watch The Master. I think some of the stuff in it is incredible. The film itself lags a little bit. It's a little bit long. But still, man, Paul Thomas Anderson is a fucking goat. But I didn't like Magnolia. I understood it. the pacing of it felt like the it felt like some of the real hyper coke scenes from Boogie Nights, and maybe some of the scenes from Blow, where there's just all this hecticness going on, but it felt like it was trying to maintain that hecticness for the entire length of the movie. And even though another great fucking movie, Hard Eight, that's what she said. Um, that's a callback from before. Um, Hard Eight and is another great Paul Thomas Anderson movie. But Magnolia felt weird to me. It just, I couldn't get into it. It was unsettling. And then some film guy's gonna be like, well, that's the point. And the interconnectivity thing I think was interesting. I don't know, maybe I watched it. Is there such a thing as watching a director's film in the wrong order? As in, if I watch The Lobster before Sacred Deer, or if I watch, Bottle Rocket before I watch Rushmore, or is that going to make me feel different? Or the Royal Tenenbaums, is that going to make me feel different about Wes Anderson? If I watch There Will Be Blood before Magnolia, and I watch The Master and Hard Eight before I watch Magnolia, does that make me feel different about Paul Thomas Anderson or Magnolia? I mean, Tom Cruise was good, but I don't understand. There's a lot of love for that film, and then I see there's a lot of hatred for it, and it sort of becomes like a joke. And for the longest time, I was out of the loop on it. I really did not know. It had passed me, and I had never watched it. So instead of watching The Sopranos or The Wire again, because I had already watched those 2 weeks ago, I decided to watch some movies, like I said, that I hadn't watched. And Magnolia just seemed like, oh, yeah, I haven't seen this. And it did not impress me. But what's your favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film? Mine would be There Will Be Blood, Boogie Nights, and Hard Eight. What's yours? Two other ones that I saw this week, and obviously I make fun of the zombie genre a lot because, again, don't Google zombie web series because you will break your computer because there will be too many results and Google will just fry your hard drive. But Ravenous, a Netflix movie from Canada, which was it wasn't an earth-shattering take on a zombie outbreak, but it was a very interesting, moody film. So if you like zombies, which I don't, unless it's very well done or original, like The Girl with All the Gifts or 28 Days Later, or the funny one. I mean, I think I don't necessarily not like zombie films if they're well done and then you give me a cool premise and it moves along, like and even The Walking Dead had its moments at the beginning. I don't necessarily hate zombies, even though I stopped watching The Walking Dead. I just feel that it's a very easy first-time filmmaker thing to do. We're going to do a zombie web series and then it never goes anywhere. So I think it's a waste of talent in some of those cases. But if it's well done with a budget and you're like, I want to make a zombie film because I'm a fan of the genre and this is my take on it, then I don't have a problem with it. This is one of those. It was nothing that you haven't already seen, a mismatched group of survivors. You're sort of putting into your head who survives, who doesn't survive. Oh, this guy's not going to survive. But, it's in French, so subtitles. And it's got its cute parts. It's got some good action. It's got some sort of hyper-realistic action as well. A lot of blood and guts. Some cool stuff in it. And I was pleasantly surprised. For the genre, for something that's been done a million times, it captivated me and it did make me want to keep watching. Now, on the bad side, two really bad movies that I saw was first, and all due respect to Terry Crews, who's a fucking goat and also awesome on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, John Henry fucking sucked. It was a good idea, horribly executed. There's a scene where it's John Henry, his dad who was crippled or something, and it's one of those things where all the bad guys wear white jumpsuits for no fucking reason, which is dumb as hell. But these two guys, a guy and a girl, bust into the house and they shoot at this guy who's behind the table. They shoot him. And then they're sitting there pointing the guns at the same table. And they let this guy get up, do like a little mini monologue, and blow them up. And then John Henry gets shot in the head, but he only gets grazed and then he knocks out. And then we cut to the next morning where somebody is walking in and just finding John Henry there. And there was a shootout. There was an explosion. Somebody blew up a gas tank. And there was like a shootout for 5 minutes. Pow, 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 pow. No silencers. No cops showed up. And we just cut to the next morning. So it had zero continuity. It was trying to be like a mythological thing. Like the myth of John Henry or the legend of John Henry. And if we were supposed to be acting like we were getting told this story and we were supposed to have the suspension of disbelief, we're in this Los Angeles where there's no cops, where people just have shootouts and nobody shows up. There's explosions in the hood and nobody gets there. It was horrible. Ludacris is in it. And can we call his performance ludicrous? No. I don't know what to say. I watched it and I kept thinking, wow, this is a good premise. It's an interesting concept, but they refuse to raise the stakes or give it a sense of realism. It was just all a combination of just moments, right? There was nothing tying them together. There's a shootout and his dad dies. Spoiler alert. But the next day he wakes up and he's fine. No consequences. Then he shows up and there's a fucking huge shootout in the middle of the day. Guns going off. But we have time to have this confrontation. And then whatever the fuck that thing was that Ludacris had on his jaw, which was like a golden beard? I don't know what the fuck that was. It just made no sense. So that was the bad. The other one was, and I got a little shit about this on a post I made about it, which was Den of Thieves, another movie I hadn't seen, and it popped up on my feed. You know, a lot of these, fuck you, Netflix, for recommending all these shitty-ass movies to me. I'm going to have a talk with your algorithm. But Den of Thieves, and I start watching it, and I start thinking, okay, this is from Heat. This is from Heat. This is the same as from Heat. And the reason I got shit from it was because I made these videos about the difference between an homage and a ripoff. But in those videos, I am well aware of when I talk about an homage that's gone too far, that you're going to throw it back into my face. Well, aren't you the one that likes to do homages in all your movies? Yeah, absolutely. I do them all the fucking time. That doesn't mean I can't point it out when I see it and say whether it's good or bad. That's, you know, if you don't think I should, then fuck you. But I'm going to do that. So I start watching Den of Thieves, and it's like beat by beat, the opening robbery from Heat. Okay, got it. I'm going to keep watching. The main cop, he's doing like a Alonzo from Training Day mixed with Pacino from Heat. Gerald Butler is the alcoholic, drug-using special forces cop that's gonna do the thing, and it's the exposition when he's talking to like the detective is just so clunky. The exposition is just shitty, and then O'Shea Jackson is not ready. And even though these actors are going over the top, O'Shea Jackson's acting is not on par with the rest of the cast. 50 Cent actually does a pretty good understated part in his role. And Pablo Schreiber from The Wire season 2, as well as Orange is the New Black, actually is supposed to be the lead here in what we think, And then it has all these heat elements, and it just starts incorporating these other movies into it. And at the end, even the friggin' score for the final bank robbery, which is very reminiscent of Heat, as in the cops find out what they're robbing as they're robbing it, and then they're rushing to do that, and then they're leaving the robbery thinking they got away with it, and the cops are showing up. It's the exact same fucking thing. Even the score was very similar. So, I don't know. I watched it, and I think in a universe where Heat didn't exist, I still wouldn't have liked this movie. But when you do an hour and a half long homage / ripoff to one of my top 5 movies of all time, you best not miss. And they missed badly. Some people that I talked to, I made a post about this and they were defending it, said they liked it, blah, blah. Some people gave me shit for calling it out. I don't care. It sucked. Avoid it. Avoid the Den of Thieves and avoid John Henry. Or hate watch them. I do that shit all the time. I hate watch movies all the time just so that I can talk shit about them. Because that's my prerogative as a podcaster, filmmaker, and general dick. Title your sex tape. So what movies did you hate, or what movies did you consume this week? What did you guys think about that? That's going to wrap it up for episode 1 of the 2AMBurrito show. I don't know, I might call it Fireside Chats with Big Chief Burrito. The Lou Martinez Podcast Experiment. Adventures in Podcasting Volume 2, Electric Boogaloo. The Get Fresh Crew Podcast. Shy Girl and the Band. I don't know. What should I name my podcast? Let me know. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this feed. Like us on Facebook. Find everything related to our company by just searching for 2AMBurrito on Facebook, YouTube, etc. And I'll be back next week with another pod. We'll try better next time. Have a safe week.